Our Western idea of the soul has both psychological and eschatological attributes. Souls animate our minds and survive our bodies when we die. The borrowing of the Greek word psyche for similar modern concepts implies that the Greeks viewed the soul in the same way that we do. Yet, we find some strange powers and abilities. The psyche may actually fly away when someone faints, and it can leave the body through a wound that's not mortal. It's possible that these divergences suggest that the early Greeks viewed the soul and human psychological makeup in a different way than we do. The 18th century scholar Erwin Roda believed that it was the experience of an apparent double of the self in dreaming, in swoons, and ecstasy that gave rise to the inference of a twofold principle of life in man and the existence of an independent, separable second self dwelling within the visible self of daily life. For Roda, it was this belief in the psyche which perhaps in turn gave rise to the idea that the souls of the departed needed sustenance and thus needed to be protected and maintained at their graves. Animism, or the tendency to ascribe living characteristics to inanimate things, has historically been thought to be the very first stage on the road to religion, science, and civilization. A believer in animism is inclined to endow all things with a conscious nature like its own. In turn, this inclination has been thought to stem from a belief in spirits or ghosts, a belief which supposedly came from man's experience with dreams, hallucinations, and drug-inspired out-of-body experiences. There are many different theories for the origins of man's belief in souls today. The Greek word for soul is psyche. It had a number of meanings which we recognize as similar to our Western idea of the soul: life, departed spirit, ghost, soul, conscious self, personality. It was also, beautifully, the word for butterfly. The psyche in Homer can be identified with a free soul which appears at times of crisis and is not bound to the body. The Trojan warrior Agenor, about to face down Achilles who is charging through and slaughtering the Trojans, reflects to himself that his opponent, mighty though he is, has only one psyche. When Achilles pursues Hector around Troy, the narrator tells us that the prize of the race will be Hector's psyche. On the other hand, most of the psychological heavy lifting in Homer is taken on by words connected inextricably to the body, specifically Thumos and Noos. Unlike psyche, the Thumos is active only when the body is awake and living. The Thumos was thought to reside mainly in the chest, where its principal seat was the phren, or phrenes, usually translated as the midriff. It is above all the source of emotions. Feelings such as hate, friendship, revenge, joy, grief, anger, and fear, they all come from the Thumos. It inspired action. Sometimes the Thumos expressed a hope or expectation, but it was always the hope to act. When Odysseus is left alone by the Greeks in a battle, he spoke to his proud Thumos. Having realized the two possibilities left to him, he ends his deliberations by asking, "But why does my Thumos consider that?" The Noos is more intellectual. In classical Greek, it is written in its contracted form, Nous. At its most basic, the Noos is the mind itself, or an act of mind, a thought or a purpose. Patroclus says that whatever he does, the Noos of Zeus is always more powerful than that of men. And on Olympus, the king of the god Zeus reproaches his daughter Athena, "Did you not yourself devise that Noos?" Where does the soul go after death? Homer consistently describes the psyche of a warrior exiting his body at the moment of death and traveling to an inaccessible, dreary land called Hades. There, the psyche had no desires or will. It was inert and impotent. When a person dies, the psyche leaves forever and departs. For example, when Hector has spoken his last words to Achilles, death overtook him, and his psyche fled from his limbs and went down to Hades. In Homer, there are no rituals, incantations, or prophecies over the dead. There's not even the whisper of an idea that a soul could live on not in Hades. Things are slightly different in the Odyssey, where the hero Menelaus is uniquely linked to immortal status, but only through his marriage to Helen. The enigmatic old sea god Proteus prophesied to Menelaus that the immortals would send him to the Elysian plains because he has Helen as his wife and is thus the son-in-law of Zeus. Elysium and the Islands of the Blessed seem to be marginal or exceptional concepts. For most people in Homer, when you're dead, you're dead. This fact led Rhoda to believe that ancestor or spirit worship prevailed at an earlier pre-Homeric time, but was subsumed into a more rational Homeric worldview later on. In fact, the earliest evidence that Rhoda found for the psyche as a double or spirit or soul of man which could wander away was actually a later fragment of Pindar from a poem probably dating to the late Archaic period. In happy fate, all die a death that frees from care, and yet there still will linger behind a living image of life, for this alone has come from the gods. It sleeps while the members are active, but to those who sleep themselves, it reveals in myriad visions the fateful approach of adversities or delights. The psyche usually did not represent a person's individuality in dreams or in forms of unconsciousness. Instead, we find Eidolon, a word from which the terms idol and idolatry derive. Eidolon has been translated in a variety of ways: phantom, ghost, image, phantasm, dream, resemblance, and representation. It takes part in a wide network of related terms that center on vision or appearance, and thus it is closely related to the concepts semblance and copy. It almost always refers to something false or uncanny. In the Iliad, an Eidolon of Aeneas is spirited away from danger by Aphrodite, and an Eidolon of the dead Patroclus appears to Achilles in a dream. In the Odyssey, the spirits of the dead met by Odysseus in the underworld are Eidola, while Athena fabricates an Eidolon in the form of the woman Iphimede to deceive Penelope. The Greeks perceived the attributes of their personalities to be structured differently than we perceive ours to be today. It was only in 5th century Athens that we start to find the kernel of the idea that the psyche became the seat and the center of consciousness. This development is not yet fully explained. It's a mystery, but it's possible that a strong influence was exerted on its progression by the rise of literacy. All right, everybody, as always, there's so much more to talk about on this topic, but if you found this video helpful or entertaining, or hopefully both, please do like and subscribe to the channel. It would help me out very much. And if you're interested in the psychology and language which underpins religious beliefs, check out this video right there on ancient sacrificial practice. Thank you guys very much. I'll see you again next time.